Word came down from the NHL today that the GMs voted to decentralize the draft again next season. What does that mean? Well, it means that once again, Gary Bettman's going to be the center of attention, and not a stitch of people from each individual organization is going to be at the draft. Yay or nay? I had to talk about it tonight. It's time for Montreal Hockey Talk. Hey gang, Kosta here from Montreal Hockey Talk, and a few things to talk about to start the show. And like I just mentioned, the draft right off the top. There's a couple of other things as you look down the list of topics, and we're going to start right away with the praise that Zach Bolduc has been getting from everybody, whether it's flowers being sent to him by the St. Louis Blues organization, or his former junior coach in Simon Gagne, or his former junior GM in Patrick Roy. I mean, there's not much to say other than the Canadiens got a good deal for a player that everybody's touted to be a very strong power forward. And it's something the Canadiens need. You know, you take a look up and down the lineup, and yeah, we've got Josh Anderson, who's a little bit of a power forward, but didn't really pan out the way we wanted. Then you've got Juraj Slafkovsky, who's developing into a power forward, but still trying to learn how to use all his tools. And then you've got Zach Bolduc, who is currently starting to learn his craft, scoring points, becoming physical, learning how to use his speed to create space. He gets into the house. He's physical. He knows how to make space. There are a lot of good things coming out about this kid. I mean, Simon Gagne couldn't say any more good things about him. And Patrick Roy, well, you know, he was too busy talking about Matthew Darche, and I don't want to talk about Matthew Darche. He and I have a thing. We'll leave it at that. But overall, when you take a look at everything that the Canadiens did, this Zach Bolduc deal, sending Mailloux over for Zach Bolduc, it really speaks volumes towards the next progression of the Canadiens' rebuild. They're good with where they are on D, to the point where they could sacrifice one of their up-and-coming good young defensemen, who Pierre Maguire said should have been in the top 10, if not for his discretions in Europe during the COVID period. So, you know, here's a kid with a lot of top 10 talent, okay, that the Canadiens got at 31 in that draft, if you remember. And, you know, the Mailloux's going to go up. He's going to do what he has to do and kind of be a replacement to Alex Pietrangelo in St. Louis, because that's what they're looking for. He will start in the third pairing. It's going to be his first rookie season. You don't expect him to start on the first pairing. You know, it's not that type of defenseman, right? He's not that type of guy. But you know that with the talent that he's had and the progression that he showed in the AHL with the Rocket and his ability to lead the defense by example, that's what they're looking for in St. Louis. And on the other side of that spectrum, the Canadiens are getting a hard-nosed, gritty, fast, smart, young hockey player that they need up front to accentuate their offense, especially if that second center that they want, who's left-handed, isn't available. Now, according to Bolduc, he's been on the ice working with Marc Bureau, former Habs and faceoff specialist, to get better at faceoffs. Whether or not he plays at center, I'm sure the Canadiens will try it during the preseason to see how it goes. But overall, I think he's going to be on the wing unless the Canadiens don't get their hands on that left-handed guy. Now, I did mention Ryan Suzuki in yesterday's show. Don't know if that's going to bring anything, but it's an idea. And if you missed yesterday's show, I'll link it later in the program. Now, speaking of Ryan Suzuki, let's talk a little bit about older brother Nic, who finally, and I say finally, got the attention of Hockey Canada. Look at the list of the projected Olympic roster via the NHL.com, and second to last, just above the name of Robert Thomas, is one Nic Suzuki. And don't tell me this is wrong. There's a lot of centers on this list. You've got Cirelli, Crosby, Bennett. You know, the list goes on and on. Connor McDavid. And notoriously, Team Canada ends up using more centers than they do wingers when they put these teams together, because after all, they do it based on talent. They don't necessarily do it based on positional play. So Nic Suzuki on that list, just above Robert Thomas. And this is in no particular order. Mark Scheifele's there too, you know, and well-deserved, despite the fact that we think he's a pompous prick. But anyway, that's just for what he did to Jake Evans. But at the end of the day, the Montreal Canadiens may very well have representation on the Olympic team once again. And that's great news for Montreal. Because if there's one thing that you know, these guys are going to yap and talk. How is it in Montreal now? How's the environment? What's it like? They're just going to talk about it. And they're going to talk about other cities too, but everybody's going to be interested in Montreal because of what's going on with the rebuild. The Canadiens, after all, are touted by a lot of people as being the team that has improved the most over this past offseason. And we know they're not done yet. They're still looking for more. But that being said, you know Nic Suzuki is going to sing the praises of this team. He's going to talk about being in there with Kent Hughes and working for Jeff Gorton and say what kind of an environment it is, how they listen to their players. And that's all stuff that players want to hear. So if you're talking about, like everybody's been saying, that, you know, Sidney Crosby wanted to come to Montreal, of course, it's been debunked by everybody. But if he did, and he heard Nic Suzuki talking about Montreal and throwing the team flowers, well, players are more prone to say, you know what, I may very well want to go there and try it for a season. They know what it's like to play as an opposition player. They love, in fact, Ovi has said it himself that his second favorite arena other than Washington is Montreal, especially given the fact that the city's so European-based. He loves it here. So maybe a lot of other players, knowing now that the organization has not only changed the identity on the ice, but has changed it off the ice, which is even more important for players, maybe, just maybe, the Olympic experience for Nic Suzuki can be a negotiation tactic. Don't call it tampering because it's not. It's just a bunch of guys talking. But it's a negotiation tactic for players because, after all, Crosby might go back to Pittsburgh and tell one of his guys, hey, you know what? If you get traded and you have a no move, maybe you want to go to Montreal. You see what I'm getting at, right? I mean, if guys praise Montreal and say it's a great place to play and things are different and blah, the list goes on and on, then that bodes well. So the fact that he's on the team, number one, well-deserved by Suzuki. He has shown year after year after year he's gotten better as time goes on. And as the captain of the team with his leadership skills as well, I mean, suffice it to say, I'm extremely happy that he's on the Olympic list. Now, whether or not he makes the team is another story altogether, but I don't see a reason why he wouldn't. Even if he's the 13th forward, who gives a rat's ass? So long as he's there. That's what's really important. I'd like to see him play, mind you, but it's really important for him to be there. Now, let's talk about a subject that everybody, we know that Kent Hughes is trying to get rid of Carey Price's contract, right? There's no hidden agenda there, right? We all know that's the case. Now, if it is the case, you got to ask yourself, how do they get rid of it? Now, obviously, they need to send it to a team that is, looking to get to the cap floor, like the Anaheim Ducks, right? Like, I think the San Jose Sharks have just reached the floor, but they may want to go a little bit higher. Same goes for Buffalo. There's a couple of other teams. I haven't really looked at the list, but I know the Ducks are right at the bottom of that list now. I think they're at $67 million as far as their spending is concerned, and they've got a lot of space to grow. Now, here's the thing. They don't necessarily have to go any higher than the floor. They could go a little bit higher than the floor, whatever, so long as it brings value. Now, the Canadiens have value to bring, and not in, trading Price's contract, a $10.5 million cap hit, but a $2 million contract to another team. But, they can make it a little bit sweeter by adding a couple of draft picks. And as I looked at that, right, the first thing I said to myself was, okay, the Canadiens draft pick status for next year is okay. It was better this year. But you look at it, they got 2 second-rounders, 2 fourth-rounders, 2 seventh-rounders. You're not going to trade your first-round pick for an empty contract, right? But the second-round pick and a fourth-round pick might be something that a GM could possibly move in order to create maneuverability with a salary cap. And what I mean by that is, if you tie up your cap money in LTIR, that money's tied up and you can't use it for anything, right? It just allows you to spend above and beyond the cap, right? But if you get rid of that money and you're actually under the salary cap, the ability to bring up players and move them up and down is a little different. And it allows you a lot more flexibility. It's kind of the reason why the Canadiens didn't really have that much movement in the roster last season with players going up and down from the Rocket. they didn't really have the space to be able to move the players and prorate their salaries, right? So that's why that happened. They want to avoid that this year because the Canadiens, I think, want to take another step towards being better and making a legitimate run. I'm not saying they will, but they want to take that step. So how do you do it? Well, I kind of sat down today and I was thinking, even if Carey Price can't play a lick of a game, right, and you want to get rid of his contract, how do you do it? Are you going to make another team pay $2 million? No, you're not. You're going to do just like you would with any other player. You're going to retain salary. So Carey Price's contract is $10.5 million, and you're allowed to retain up to 50% of said contract. So the Canadiens can actually retain the amount of money that they have to pay. So they can retain the $2 million and pass off the $8.5 million cap hit with the contract over to the Anaheim Ducks, still pay Price the money that he's due, but open up $8.5 million on the cap. And then, of course, like I said, you throw a couple of draft picks in. Now, I sent it over to Jimmy Murphy from the Sick podcast, The Eye Test, and he thought my math was perfect and that it made total sense. I have my trepidations because, after all, the cap hit is $10.5 million, but what he has to be paid this year is $2 million, right? Because it was a cascading contract, right? Does that factor in? I don't think it does. I think it's the annual average salary that does. So if your cap hit is 10.5, you can retain up to 50% of the cap hit. So if they can do that, then the Canadiens can retain all of the whole $2 million, send the 8.5 over to a team like the Ducks with a couple of draft picks to sweeten the pot. And lo and behold, the Canadiens have $8.5 million of cap space available. That doesn't mean they're going to try to do something. They're not going to try to do something else as far as trading is concerned. Doesn't mean they're not going to move a player with a higher contract, i.e. a Kirby Dach or a Patrick Laine or a Mike Matheson in his last year of his contract. It doesn't mean they won't. But if you look at the Price contract in and of itself, I think the easiest way to get rid of it is to just tell a team, listen, I just want you to take the cap hit, right? Because you've got that space available to you. It's not going to cost you a dime, and I'll give you a couple of draft picks. I think teams will say yes if you actually put that together. Let me know what you think. If it doesn't make sense, by all means, put it down in the comments. Scream it out loud on social media. Tell me I'm nuts. But if my math is right and I interpreted the CBA properly, this is a loophole that a lot of teams haven't looked at that may very well work in the Canadiens' favor. I think it's worth a shot if they can do it. Now, finally, the news of the day. Decentralization of the draft agreed to by the general managers. Now, I am not a fan of the NFL or the NBA draft where the commissioner stands up on stage and he announces all the picks. I am certainly not a fan of getting people to go on stage and representing a team like Joshua Jackson, like WWE superstar Bayley, who actually had the wherewithal to show up with a championship belt, or having Happy Gilmore show up to make the pick for the Bruins. I like Adam Sandler. I don't like the Bruins. This picture bothers me. Okay? So now, all this because the Montreal Canadiens were cool enough in the 2024 draft to have Celine Dion go on stage and make the Demidov pick. So they were like, oh, this is cool. Why can't other teams do it? Let me think for a second. Does Bayley, Joshua Jackson have the star power of a Celine Dion? No. Do any of those teams have the history of the Montreal Canadiens? No. Is it significant to these other cities that a celebrity does announce their pick? I really fucking doubt it. I really do. I think it was a special moment that they're all trying to take advantage of so that teams don't have to travel in bunches of 20 and 30. Now, here's the catch, and this is what bugs me the most, right? It's kind of like the way Paul Maurice thinks of the handshake line during the playoffs, right? He thinks it's for the players, it's not for the coaches, right? But I'm going to say this about the draft. The draft is not for the league. The draft is for the partners. The draft is for the fans. The draft is especially for the players. All right? These are young kids that are starting their NHL journey, right? So if you're starting your NHL journey, do you want to start it by looking at this? You're in a room that looks kind of like a walk-in closet with a screen, and at the far end, you're the first overall pick, and you've got three doofuses standing there looking back at you through Zoom, and they can't even look straight into the camera. They look off to the screen because they're told, oh, the camera's there, and they can't get it, right? And then you look at, the Ducks, and, you've got the three guys standing there in front of, what? The beach. Or that's what it looks like anyway in the background. There's blue skies, and McQueen's looking at him like, wow, I want to be there with you. Well, he actually is because he's in LA, but still, right? They're there. It's not going to cost the Ducks anything. It's not going to cost the San Jose Sharks much. It's not going to cost the LA Kings sweet nothing because they're already there. So that's 3 of your 32 teams. And honestly, for the players, I think it's really important to have people there that care. There's nothing that doesn't represent hockey more than a player going up on stage, walking up to the owner, the GM, director of hockey ops, and the scout that wanted him, right? The guy who's responsible for him being picked to go to the National Hockey League. Sure, all these guys hopped onto a plane and were sent to their respective cities the next day. Granted, and that's fine and dandy. But when you look at it live, think about it for a minute. Would Matthew Schaefer's reaction not be a whole lot different with more people on the stage, as opposed to looking into, the depths of hell when you're looking at a screen and standing there alone crying because your mom can't be there and you're wearing a New York Islanders jersey with a cancer ribbon on it to represent her, which was a great move by the Islanders, by the way. But, don't you think about 2024. Think about when Michael Hage got picked, right? And think about the reaction. Him going up on stage. And you saw beforehand, Kent Hughes was excited to pick him because he knew the history. That history doesn't translate when it's just Gary Bettman on stage and your random celebrity who, by the way, won an NBA championship this year but couldn't do anything for the Habs because in the first round, the Habs traded both their picks. But he did get to press the big red button for the trade alert. Woohoo. Notwithstanding. To me, there's a much more emotional investment when, for that first round, the people are there and they're on stage. What does it cost you? How much does it cost you to get the celebrity to make the pick? It'll cost you a dime or two, right? So if you're going to spend that money on a celebrity, why not spend it on having your team there to show how much you care about those players? If you don't want everybody there, if you don't want 20 people there, fine. Send the owner, send the GM, and I think, for all intents and purposes, having the GMs together is a great way to have a trade happen on the floor. Not by phone, but when they're standing there talking. They walk from table to table. You see, when you see these pictures previously of two GMs standing in the corner, like when Brian Burke got both Sedin twins. He didn't do it over the phone. He did it in one of the nooks and crannies of the rink where they were at. He was standing there talking. They made the deal. They went over. They got the trade, and then he picked the two Sedin twins. That didn't happen over the phone, and it certainly wasn't going to happen over the internet because you know how much Brian Burke likes the internet and stuff. So why? Why change that? Why take away the entertainment value for the fans, right? The ability to be able to have every outlet interview the general manager or the head scout or whatever the case may be after a pick is made, right? There was so much time taken, so many delays, right? And each team has 3 minutes. If you got 32 teams and you got 3 minutes to make your pick, how the hell did the show end up being 3+ hours long? Beats me, because you have your 3 minutes and then it takes another 4 to get the celebrity to come out on stage, say hi, thank the city of Los Angeles. Not a single person saying anything about the Florida Panthers winning the cup again, by the way. And, one person, I think, thanked the city of LA for hosting, right? And they're not even a member of any organization. It was, one of the celebrities. Where's the tact? Where's the importance? Where's the feel? It's so robotic is the best word I can think of. And it's not supposed to be. The NHL draft and any draft that involves a kid, whether it's the OHL draft, the NHL draft, the Bantam Select draft, you name it, it involves emotion for every kid. It's the next step in their hockey evolution. And by not being there live to shake their hand, put your arm around them, and at least take a picture together, you're minimizing all those years of work those kids put in to get to that level, to get to your organization. Sure, the teams want to save a couple of bucks because, oh, well, during COVID, we didn't spend anything. We just did it over Zoom. Well, let me tell you something. One of the things that the society has lost, and I'm going to get, all kinds of philosophical here for a second, but one of the things that society has lost and kids today have lost is feeling, empathy, understanding of what it's like to interface with other people. Everything's either via text or via social media these days, right? Nobody picks up the phone to talk anymore. They text. But when you have to talk to somebody because they're there, it's tangible. It's important. It gives you an impression of the person. Why is it so hard to let the kids have one day to say, congratulations, start your engines, you're going to the NHL? And I didn't hear Gary Bettman say that once. He'd said it in other drafts. So decentralizing the draft, the entertainment value was crap for the fans. I'm sure the emotional factor for players was absolute garbage. The teams, they don't mind because they're at home. They don't have to travel. It's vacation time after all. And you've got free agency coming up a few days later, so there's still work to do. But at the end of the day, the draft is your gateway to accepting these players into your organizations for the first time. Whether they go back to college, whether they go to back to junior, or whether they're straight to the AHL after the draft. Regardless. There's a little bit of importance there, guys, that everybody's starting to lose. And it's a big part of the NHL. The NHL, the way the game is played and the way the game is viewed, especially in Canada, and I'm not going to take anything away from fans in the U.S. either. Okay, I shouldn't do that. But fans are emotionally invested in their teams. So if that's the case, why take the emotion out of the draft? That's all I'm saying. We'll see you next time.